Welcome to another episode of the Raw Paleo Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Emmanuel Zuckerman, and in today's episode, I'm going to discuss instinctive eating. So, what is instinctive eating? Instinctive eating is one approach to the raw paleo diet. In instinctive eating, the idea is that as long as you're eating natural, unprocessed foods, your body will instinctively tell you how much you need, which foods it wants, and when to stop. The idea is based in part on the observation that a lot of animals in the wild and even domesticated will know how much they need to eat and then stop. They also seem to intuitively know when they need something additional in their diet. For instance, dogs will often eat grass to help in their digestion. Many animals will eat certain mushrooms and avoid other ones. And most of the time, the stuff is not learned but rather instinctual. In terms of evolution, it is reasonable to conclude that our bodies regulate our desires according to what we need to eat, and if these mechanisms were faulty, then we would not have survived. On the other hand, when we process and cook foods, then we circumvent these mechanisms, since in most of our evolutionary past, we did not cook by fire, and certainly we did not have the highly processed food that we do now. And it is entirely clear that people overeat with this highly processed food. So that is the basic theory, and then to practice it, pretty much all you have to do is try to listen to your body. You might sample some things initially, but at some point you're supposed to let your body guide you on what you should eat and what you shouldn't. You should pay attention to your cravings, assuming that these are cravings for natural foods, and to your instinctive stops, which is when you have reached a point where your body no longer needs any more of the food you're eating and therefore tells you that it's no longer tasty and you should stop eating it. A lot of people have practiced this approach to diet very successfully, but this doesn't mean that there aren't any theoretical gaps that need to be filled in. For example, you could imagine that these mechanisms operate under certain assumptions. Perhaps they operate under the assumption that you only have access to meat once a month, say, and when that happens, you need to gorge on it before other animals get to this carcass. So then you will gorge on meat once, but perhaps you now have access to meat every day, and this mechanism assumes you will only have access to it once in a while, and therefore there is no stopping mechanism that tells you you're eating too much, because the underlying assumption is that the environment will bottleneck how much meat you get. Another potential theoretical issue is that there are other aspects to our environment and they might interact with our mechanisms. Just like people who have emotional problems use food to medicate themselves, thus overriding any instinctive mechanism, so you could imagine that many other things have a similar effect. For instance, our artificial lights might simulate a year-long summer, and a year-long summer might signal to our body the desire for sugars, and therefore cause us to overeat in sugars. So in this sense, the diet is not completely straightforward. In practice, however, it is a great guide to work with to try to understand what you should eat and how much of it. For example, if you are eating some plant and the plant is bitter, you should probably spit it out because it might be poisonous. And this is your instinctive mechanism in action. On the other hand, certain foods can make your stomach feel really good, and of course there are foods that make your stomach feel bad. And these foods that make your stomach feel really good are of course healthy for you. Another interesting aspect of this approach is that when you are eating, you should be fully immersed in the experience. It is one of those cultivate awareness moments, because the more focused you are on the food and on your senses, the better your connection is to your instinctive mechanisms, and the better your decision making on whether you should keep eating, stop eating, and perhaps your enjoyment as well.